One common form of defects in concrete members is the appearance of cracks. It's important to understand what these cracks represent and whether they are of a structural concern to us or not. So in this video, we'll be going through the types of cracks that you will commonly observe on concrete members. So in outline of the video, I'll give a brief introduction of the causes of cracks in concrete, some statistics that highlight the main causes of cracking in concrete members, and then we'll look at the mechanism of classifying cracks. So usually they're classified as either taking place before the concrete hardens or after the concrete hardens. Now cracks, as I said, they can take place either before hardening or after hardening of the concrete. They can sometimes reduce the durability of the concrete, and they impact the serviceability of your concrete members. And in some cases, if the durability is impacted, then that might lead to issues in terms of structural integrity of the concrete. So for us, it's important to understand which cracks would create an impact on the structural integrity of the overall structure. Now, in terms of statistics, as you can see on the screen in front of you, the pie chart represents the percentage occurrences of cracks per cause. So the highest cause is that related to construction methods, so issues with construction on site. So we're talking about failure maybe to vibrate the concrete mix or poor workmanship on site. There's also issues related to design. So design of the mix can create issues in terms of cracks appearing. And then you have environmental concerns as well. And finally, the quality of the materials that are used. So your cement type or the type of admixture that you're mixing in with your concrete. Aggregates can also have an impact on the creation or the lack of cracks in your concrete members. But the types of cracks, as I said, they're generally classified as either occurring before hardening of the concrete or after hardening. Let's start by looking at cracks that take place before the hardening of the concrete member. So the first type of cracks that take place before the concrete hardens is plastic shrinkage cracks. And the cracks, you can tell that they're plastic shrinkage cracking by looking at the pattern that you see visible on the concrete member. Now you can see an image in front of you that demonstrates two of these patterns. So pattern number one is more of a random sort of pattern, and then the pattern beneath it represents parallel lines, so parallel cracks to one another. And that's how you can tell it's plastic shrinkage cracking that's taking place. It's the reason that it happens is because there's the rapid drying of the moisture on the surface of the concrete once you pour it, and it leads to the concrete member shrinking, so a quick change in volume, and hence these cracks appear. Often this is not a structural issue. It's more from an aesthetic purposes that we're concerned, but not structurally. Now, points that you should consider in order to avoid plastic shrinkage from taking place. Plastic shrinkage cracking will be reduced if you dampen the subgrade or the formwork when you're pouring. If you use cold water as well in your concrete mix, especially in hot climates, that would help. Aliphatic alcohol can be applied to the concrete surface after screeding, and that's to reduce the evaporation of surface water. So curing is another thing that you have to pay close attention to. You have to start curing as soon as your slab or your concrete beam is ready. And then finally, some research also indicates that the use of steel fibers in the concrete mix helps to reduce or avoid plastic shrinkage cracking. Now the second type of cracks that take place before hardening of the concrete is the constructional movement cracks, and these are mostly associated with formwork movement. So if your formwork moves during the pouring of the concrete, you get these cracks happening. Also, if your soil is moving somehow, if it settles, you do get these constructional movement cracks appearing on your concrete members. Plastic settlement cracking is another type that takes place before the concrete hardens. This is where there's sort of like a settlement in the concrete around the reinforcement, and you can see the pattern because it sort of follows the reinforcement that's inside your concrete member. You can see that on the screen in front of you. Notice how the cracks, they are sort of longitudinal. They go across the member and they follow the pattern of the reinforcement that's embedded in the concrete member. So plastic settlement cracks, sometimes they're a structural issue, sometimes they're not. Depends on the size of the crack, but usually it's more so aesthetically non-pleasing rather than it being a very critical structural defect. Now we've talked about the cracks that take place before the hardening of the concrete. Let's have a look at cracks that take place after the hardening of concrete. So that's after you get your concrete in its solid state. The first type of cracks, the drying shrinkage cracks, and these take place when there's rapid loss of water from your mix, from the concrete that's set. The reasons behind such cracks appearing is due to there being a lot of water in the mix, so more than what was needed or was required. Sometimes also if you have poor joint placement in your concrete members, this can lead to drying shrinkage cracks. Again, it's cracks that are caused due to changes in volume in the concrete, and the change in volume happens when the water evaporates very quickly. The pattern that is very common when it comes to drying shrinkage cracks is what you see in front of you on the screen. It's more of a transverse pattern, and they typically happen on large surfaces. So if you're talking about, say, for instance, slabs, but sometimes when you have a wall or a vertical element such as a wall, you can notice these cracks because they have this diagonal pattern, and you can see that on the left-hand side of the screen. Another type of cracks that are very common when it comes to concrete members or elements is the corrosion crack, and this is what you see in front of you on the screen. So this happens when the reinforcement corrodes. Most of the cases, the reason that it happens is because there is not sufficient cover. So your reinforcement is located close to the surface of the concrete, and when you have poor cover, it means that there's more of a chance that the chloride ions or water will seep through and hence lead to corrosion. And in order for corrosion to take place, of course, you need moisture and you need chloride ions. So the easier it is for moisture and chloride ions to penetrate your member, the more likely it is that you will experience such types of cracks. Settlement cracks is another type as well that takes place after the concrete hardens. It's due to sudden movements in the ground surface. So let's say, after 2 years, your soil moves, it consolidates with time, and due to such soil movement, you start noticing these cracks. You can identify them because they are usually above and aligned with your steel reinforcement, as you can see in the image in front of you. And the causes of settlement cracks, again, is due to excessive water in your concrete mix. Thermal cracks is another type of cracks that take place after the concrete hardens, and it's due to the freezing and thawing cycles that are associated with moisture in the concrete, freezing and then melting, and then the cycle repeats. And as the cycle repeats, you get constant changes in the volume of the concrete, and as such, you get cracks that take place. You can identify them because they're transverse in pattern, and they're more common in regions where it's cold. And then you have your structural cracks, and these cracks take place because you overload your structure. If your structure cannot bear the loads that are on it, it will crack, and the cracks sort of look at like what you can see in front of you. Now these are very important cracks, because if they do happen, then it means that your structural integrity is impacted. Now this is a very good reference to highlight some of the types of cracks that we have gone through in this video. So I hope that this video has helped clarify a bit the types of cracks that you are likely to experience in concrete members.